Welcome, travelers, to my realm of nightmares. Allow me to be your personal assistant. Come in, take a seat, get comfortable. For when you step into my realm, there's no stepping out.
It burns. Oxygen bleeds from my world. The choking, the sputtering. My chest is ablaze and my throat is raw. The life drains hardly from me as the vessels within my eyes burst from asphyxiation. I struggle, I pant, I wheeze, and I fight, but whatever energy I may have once had has long escaped me. The darkness is coming, and it is far too late. My eyes glaze, and my mind becomes shallow as I fight my last desperate fight, but each breath is an illusion now, and my path out has long since gone. I am but a wave in a never-ending ocean, and I am nothing but fleeting as I cascade silently against the shore. I am the deepest depths of the deep, and I am becoming lost within each forced and painful gasp. I am destined to lay within the black. I will rest submerged forever. The air catches in my throat as I'm suddenly awake. For a second, I struggle to catch my breath as my lungs move with purpose. The anxiety fizzles throughout as I suck at each and every ounce of purity. After a few moments, the thumping within my chest steadies and my composure returns. What the hell was that? The dream had obviously taken me, but as I sat up within my seat, the interior of the train coming back into focus, I realized that I could not recall a single element of the nightmare, which had wrapped itself so perfectly around me. The sensation of fear I had awoken with had quickly dissipated, easing itself from my mind and almost eloquently as the dream itself had. Somewhere within there, somewhere within my consciousness, buried far within, it was still there, lingering, waiting. No matter how hard I tried to make sense of the feeling, I found that I could not. I had simply awoken abruptly, struggling to breathe, with no apparent reason as to why, far beyond the boundaries of my own thoughts. The driver began his announcement as his smooth and reassuring tone filled the interior of the carriage. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for all choosing Beta Rail for your journey today. We will shortly be approaching the Eternal. For those of you not quite seasoned, the first time making the pass can be a little disconcerting, to say the very least. I'm acutely aware that we are far from full today, so if anyone on board requires any assistance, any assurance, really anything at all, at any time, then please do not hesitate to flag down a member of the staff, who will, of course, be at your full disposal to ensure this section of our trip proceeds as pleasantly as possible. They will be on hand to assist and answer any questions that you may have. Enjoy the ride, and do try to enjoy the scenery. Rarely are we afforded a bit of peace and quiet in this life. Once again, I'd like to thank you for choosing Beta, the Eternal. I had never made the journey through myself, but I had done enough research to have an idea of what to expect. The Eternal, as it has been commonly named, was a stretch of trek that took us through a rather long and seemingly endless tunnel, hence the name. The tunnel had been constructed through the middle of a mountain, which they found normally, albeit a little too late, to have a rather substantial buildup of metals hidden within its crust. By the time they had discovered the odd abnormality, the project was already a year in, so the construction company, who were already financially committed to the project, had little choice but to continue on as planned. These metals, however, could not be removed, so the tunnel was simply built around them. It was not until the maiden voyage, however, when the first train passed through into the endless void, that it was discovered that the buildup of material buried within the mountain acted as a barrier of sorts to most, if not all, electronics. Once you entered the tunnel, there would be no phone signal, no text, no internet, and no messages. Nothing but external powered lights would remain active, and essentially, all communication with the outside world would be severed. The tunnel spanned for miles, which meant that this section of the journey would take precisely an hour to complete. And once we were in there, inside, trapped within the tight and claustrophobic walls, there would be nothing but the darkness and the silence for company. I sighed and reached for my phone as an unsettling feeling of dread began to course unpleasantly from inside of me. Are you kidding me? The screen was completely black. Confused, I swiped at the glass, but the handset did not react. I held down the power button, pushed at the few remaining buttons, and even aimlessly shook it a few times. I am sure that I charged this before the journey. After a few seconds, the phone lit up white, and then a message began to type its way slowly across the screen. Good afternoon, Gabriel. We are shortly due to become lost within the bleak blackness of the tunnel. In no more than 120 seconds, I will begin. I continued to stare at the screen for a few seconds, dumbfounded at the sudden communication which had inched its way slowly across my palm. The message did not appear to have been received via text, and it had not come from any other app. It had somehow seemed to have completely originated from nowhere. It had infected my screen and had somehow taken control of my phone. Another message followed, urging me to divert my attention downward. Are you not going to reply to me, Gabriel? I have put so much effort into ensuring that this conversation was anything but one-sided. There's a space for your thoughts just below mine, after all. 110 seconds. Clearly below the mysterious message was a section on the screen for my response. Hesitantly, I clicked the box, and a key popped up on the screen. Without thinking, my fingers moved, and my response came. Who is this? Who am I? I am nobody, Gabriel, yet I am the most important person that you will never know within the entirety of your self-absorbed, self-centered, pathetic little life. 90 seconds. Excuse me? I am every person that you've ever stepped on, every little person that you've ever ignored, that you despised, every human that you have ever treated less than human. I am vengeance, and I am power. I am the voice that is rarely afforded, and within the next 60 minutes, I plan on speaking, let's say, a considerable amount. I think it goes without saying that at this point, Gabriel, my words will not be delivered, well, let's say in the conventional sense. 80 seconds. My fingers shook slightly as I responded. What do you want? How are you doing this? I felt the chill move through me as the response materialized on my screen. What do I want? I will tell you what I want, Gabriel. I want you to sit up and take notice for once. People like you never really take the time to notice, do you? Your kind are always so wrapped up in your own lives that you never notice what is going on around you, do you? The misery, the suffering, all of it plays heavily upon the eyes, does it not? So please, take a look around you just this once, and drink in the life that you see. You really should take one last look, and go ahead, I'll wait. Do not take too long though, you only have 60 seconds left. Instinctively, my eyes moved up to study my surroundings. The interior of the train was, well, an interior of a train. Empty seats lined the carriage on either side, with the exception of one or two. To my right sat a woman, quietly working on her laptop, and I knew there was a younger gentleman somewhere further along the carriage. I had seen him when I had entered. Everything looked normal. Everything looked in place. But the intrusion on my phone had changed the tone. A palpable taste of impending doom now hung heavily within the carriage, carrying through the air as the train continued to move with speed along the track. The feeling had burst outward from my phone, delivered via a message, its mass building with the aid of adrenaline, which had begun to move noticeably through my veins. Something was going on. Something was coming, and the very thought of it was terrifying. My attention turned back to my phone, held within my now sweaty palm. It's a train. So what? So what? The response on my screen seemed to contain heavy anger, a horrid sort of hatred that had been eloquently conveyed through the two simple words that were shot back in a quick and pinpoint retort. I will tell you what, Gabriel. On board this train today are 7 individuals. The drivers, the 2 attendants, you, the young woman in the shirt to your right, the young man precisely 8 rows in front of you, and of course, let us not forget, me. All but one of the 7 will be dead before the train emerges on the other side of the eternal. I sincerely hope that the nightmare which you just awoke from did not take too much from you, Gabriel. You are going to need all of your strength for the next hour. Let us see who of us can survive for 60 minutes. My reality slowed as the response sank unsettlingly through my being. Somewhere within the background, the driver made one last announcement through the train. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming up on the eternal. Lights will be out shortly. See you on the other side. The bulb above me began to flicker as another message slowly made its way across the screen within my hand. Best of luck, Gabriel. I'm rooting for you. 10 seconds. The bulb above me flickered a few more times before finally, a moment later, the brightness of its fight extinguished in tandem with every other bulb within the carriage. Plunging myself and the other handful of passengers into a thick darkness, which quickly coated our surroundings and blackened our reality as the train abruptly entered the tunnel. Panic. My mind was suddenly a haze of contradictions, a tangled web of panic and fear, immobilized by a debilitating dread, which swam forcefully through the acidic adrenaline, pounding nastily within my veins. This cannot be real. It's a prank. It has to be a joke. A gentle red hue filled the train as a strip of emergency lights gently illuminated within a line down the center of the carriage. It has to be a joke. This cannot be real. A second, a moment, a reprieve, anything. An opportunity to think, a respite to recharge, or a thought without fault. Anything would have been preferable. Anything apart from the violent thumping of my heart, which seemed to echo out from inside my chest. Its violent ferocity laid bare for the rest of the travelers within the small, darkened interior to hear. Anything would have been preferable. Anything but the scream which tore its way through my ears, claiming my undivided attention as it shot forcefully forward from the black of the carriage just behind me. Help me, please! She's bleeding! The young attendant pushed forward, closing the distance towards me, her eyes locked in fear, her eyes trapped within a permanent terror. The red drained slowly down her face as she moved, the opened wound on her skull pulsating more of the thick liquid as her gaze danced around the carriage within a frenzied spasm. Her arms flailed, unaided, as her lips moved again with a final, desperate plea. "Please, help me. He killed him. He killed him." The woman in the red shirt was already standing, her courage preceding that of any discernible thought on my part. She hurried forward, barely managing to catch the young attendant as her legs buckled, causing her body to fall almost sideways into the woman, who thankfully managed to prevent her fall. "Oh my God, are you okay?" The attendant began to cry hysterically into the woman with the red top as I made my way to my feet. "Do something! Be a man!" "Ladies?" My words were not loud enough. My less than heroic tone was drawn perfectly within the darkness and the terrified cries of the attendant as she wept openly within the darkness. "We have to move forward. He killed him! He killed him!" "Who? What happened? Who are you talking about?" The attendant let out a wail as she moved her hand up to the gushing wound on the top of her skull. "Jamie, my colleague. He stabbed him. He cut him. And he was laughing. He wouldn't stop laughing. He's dead. Oh my God, he's dead. There's a man back there. We have to go forward. He was chasing me. He is coming." Time slowed as I suddenly became aware of the rattling noise of the train as it moved with speed through the pitch black tunnel. My senses had been heightened, and all of a sudden, everything seemed more pronounced, as my body fought desperately to disregard the unbearable fear which had begun to grow nastily inside of me. The lights on the floor glowed a peaceful red, a perfect hue to complement the hard sight of blood, as it poured unrestricted from the young attendant's scalp. My mind was unthinking, my mind was unfeeling, and for a second, my mind was at peace. That was until the sight behind the two crouched women came slowly into view. There he is, behind them, further down along the carriage, bathed in a sickening red glow, and stood, with an intimidating stature, was the silhouette of her assailant. From a distance, he was nothing, his features concealed nicely by the natural darkness of the tunnel, but the object in his hand, however, that glinted with a noticeable light, as the ground beneath my feet swayed with a desperate panic. "He has a knife!" Even though the darkness shrouded his face, I knew that he was smiling at me. I could feel it. The young attendant, almost on instinct, briefly turned to look back down the carriage, and immediately she began to scream. "Oh my God, no! We have to go, please! We have to run!" I was already moving. There was no thought, no plan, no call to action, and no instinct to be a man. I simply turned and began to move, my mind clear and my thoughts fixed purely on myself. I moved, and I ran, and I fled to the beautiful serenade of female screams as they desperately chased after me, demanding my assistance, begging for me to stop. I had briefly turned backwards as I continued to make my escape in slow motion. She had fallen. The young attendant could not keep up. The wound on her head was obviously more severe than I initially thought. When I turned, I could see that she had once again fallen and was now crumpled within a heap beneath one of the seats. The woman in the red shirt briefly paused as she turned back, obviously, within that moment, mentally deciding whether the true cost of her morals was really worth the price of sale. And he was getting closer. My head turned back on instinct, my eyes locking tightly on the door to the next carriage in front of me as I continued my escape. My gaze was so resolute that I barely saw the young gentleman appear in front of me as he darted past and pushed heroically back towards the two women, cowering within my wake. There was screaming, there was yelling, there was a nightmare brewing behind me. Consequence and choice, horror and demise by the gravity did not have time to sink in. The gravity could not catch me. I forcefully pushed my way into the next carriage and turned, scurrying to find a locking mechanism of sorts. Anything which would bar the way back to danger. My hands shook and my mind screamed. But I willed my digits to continue as my fingers vibrated violently against the metal frame of the door in search of a lever. From behind the glass of the door, even through the blinding darkness of the train, I could see them. The woman in the red shirt and the young gentleman. They were running towards me. Behind them, still crumpled up in a pathetic mess, was the young attendant, and above her, thrusting forcefully down with a convicted and evil conviction, was her killer. He was stabbing her. His eyes moved back up, and suddenly they became locked within an unbreakable embrace with the two surviving passengers, who closed the distance towards my position. "Get the hell out of my way! Let us through!" The young gentleman pushed heavily past me with the woman in the red shirt and immediately turned back, instinctively locating a locking mechanism within his first try. He yanked the lever down, and with force he turned back to us, breathless and drenched in a well-concealed fear. "Where the hell were you going?" My mind struggled to find words, and instead, all I could muster was a blubbering mess, an incomprehensible sentence or statement which made little to no sense, even to the most trained ear. The younger gentleman huffed in disapproval. "Guess I'm the only man on board." He was right. I had done nothing. I had not even tried. I had been presented with a horror, a situation born from nowhere, never expected, and with little to no time afforded for a coherent response. I had made a life, and I had made a living from planning, from being prepared, and from having time to think. But here, within the bulging blackness of the tunnel, I had been giving nothing. I had no time, I had no luxury of forethought, and I had no opportunity to don a disguise. In the real world, I could pretend to be anyone, just as long as I had the time. I could pretend to be courageous. I could portray bravery, intelligence, and above all, I could pretend to be in control. But down here within the eternal, it was different. Everything happened so fast, the commodity of time had been abandoned the moment that I had stepped aboard the train. The darkness had exposed me for a coward. The tunnel had shown my true colors, and the train was simply a vessel for my admission of guilt, my confession of cowardice. I was not a man, but a boy, in the presence of giants. My peers would know the truth. I had been usurped by a younger cub. Within my professional circles, I was a lion. Within life, I was a liability. Again, the younger gentleman shook his head. "We have to get to the front of the train and signal the driver. We need to get help." His words drifted past me as my mind buzzed with the gravity of the realization as if it brutally threw out my interior. There is no left. It was true, and somehow I already knew it. I was a creature of habit, and I was a creature of routine. I had built my life and my empire on strategy and solidifying its structure, on solid planning, and planning required time. Time, the most basic of commodities, which I had taken for granted. Time had given me a shield. Time had given me a disguise. I had used time to look strong. I had used time to look in control. But as my mind wandered within the train's carriage, desperately trying to formulate a plan to a situation which could not be planned, I knew that time was running thin. After all, the phone within my hand reminded me as such, as it buzzed bright with another message. The words bleeding eerily slow across the screen as my eyes registered their meaning. "One down, Gabriel, and with 50 minutes left to spare. It's going to be a long hour." Tonight's story was 60 Minutes by the talented and amazing Ray Beamon. If you enjoyed this, chances are you'll enjoy the rest of his stuff. Check out his links in the description. Hey, did you know I have merch? Yeah, it's crazy, right? But I do. And if you would like to walk around representing my realm and gaining new travelers, the links to my merch store will be in the description below. But as always, I'd like to say a special thank you to my lovely Patreons. 242 Reads, Rando Calrissian, Pam, Seraphine the Midnight Bard, Creepy Con Girl, Mia Mina, Philia Noctis, Hair-Raising Narratives, and Spooky Boo's Scary Story Time. If you'd like to join these lovely travelers but I'll let them on fire, you can do so by becoming a Patreon. Just remember, the support is always appreciated but never expected. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ding that bell for all future content.
And as always, travelers, once you step into my realm, there's no stepping out.